That's cool.
Oh yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Charlie Gies. I'm. Hi, Heidi. Good to see you. Good to have you. My name is Charlie Gies. You know, I've been participating in this group for a few years, I think now, and I'm a retired mainframe computer software engineer. Hi, Heidi, and hi, Pam. How are you doing? And I have level 1 autism. Wasn't diagnosed until about a quarter of a century ago. Hi, Kiana, or Kenyana, rather, I should say. And anyway, I'm going to basically go into and discuss my experience in transitioning into adulthood, but I want to go back into the things that my mom and dad did that helped me to be prepared for it. When I was growing up, not much was known about autism. And so my parents never had a label on why I was different from other kids. But they knew there was something different about me. And they knew I had difficulty fitting in with other kids socially. There were some really quirky things about me, but at the same time, also I was way ahead of the other kids in math. I was generally good at academic subjects. But various ways. One area in which my mom and dad helped me prepare for adulthood was practical training. And these days, some neurotypical kids don't get the practical training they really need for adult life. But the important thing is, where as much as it's warranted, and again, your child. I mean, you get some of these kids that are level 3. There might not be much hope of their leading an independent life as an adult. But even then, they may be able to fool you. Because remember, the Temple Grandin's mother was told by a doctor that she was hopelessly brain damaged. And look at what she's accomplished in life. But one of the things, my mom taught me the basics of cooking when I was growing up. And I was a very fussy eater, although I think I had a greater range of foods that I ate than a lot of the kids that are growing up today, because I think mom exposed me to a wide variety of foods. So I was always able to find some things that I really liked. But she taught me the basics of nutrition. And when she had to give me vitamins to make up for things I wasn't getting in my diet because of my limited food tastes, she explained to me where I could get these things from and why they were important. And so all this helped me as my food tastes branched out as I got into my teen years, and helped me to get into the habit of eating a balanced diet as an adult. And and when it came to cooking, when I eventually moved out on my own and I lived for a year and a half by myself as a bachelor, during that time I never had a single TV dinner. Sometimes I grabbed food out, but a lot of times I ate simple meals that I fixed at home. I would roast a chicken, and that would last me for 4 nights. And I would make a salad to go with it, and uh, cook rice or something else as a starch to go with it, and so I had balanced meals. And eventually, I've branched out into more gourmet cooking. And as my wife Cindy, who's with me here, she can tell you, you know, I've been doing most of the cooking for us now, and you know, so it's a skill that has served me well. I also learned at home the basics of doing laundry, and that helped me through college and also in living on my own as a bachelor, and it's helped me throughout adult life since then. And even now, I do most of the laundry for us. So, yeah, and,
Hi, Heidi. So what does Cindy do?
yeah. Um, Cindy works hard at keeping the house clean, for one thing. That's something I don't do so much of, and Cindy mainly does that. Uh, Another thing that my parents did was sharing tidbits about college life, and this prepared me for college life. My dad would always, tell me stories about his experiences in college, and he told me stories about college football and so on, and all this prepared me for it. Also, teachers, in particularly in high school, shared with us a lot of things about what to expect, and the fact you don't get good grades, you'll flunk out, you'll get kicked out. Let's say hi to Pam.
Hi, Pam.
In addition to that,
What about socially?
socially, I was able to make and maintain friendships more easily as I transitioned. That's a good question. I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that. I'm, you know, I'm, but one of the things that was the parental expectations. My mom and dad expected us kids, including me, to, I'm the oldest of three kids, by the way, in my family, but they expected us to be able to live independently as adults. They expected us to go to college and to graduate from college and get jobs, and they expected us to get married and have families, and all these expectations. You have an expectation to live up to. You're more likely to live up to it than if you don't have an expectation on the part of the parents. So again, something I tell parents in the group, in fact, is try to be as optimistic as your child's situation warrants. Uh, um, my dad also showed me basics of handling finances, balancing a checkbook. He showed me what credit cards were about. And now to the point raised in a question here, one thing that helped too is learning group activities. Uh, my mom taught my sister and me how to play bridge. Uh, then I learned how to play chess. My parents gave me a chess set. My dad taught me how to play, but he didn't quite have all the moves exactly right. But he also gave me a chess book for beginners, and there I got everything straight. And so that's something too that's afforded me opportunities to socialize with others. Um, you know, then my dad taught us to play hearts. That's a game too that been able to play as an adult. And taught me rummy games, gin rummy, 500 rummy. My mom taught me canasta. Then when I got to college, I saw some guys in my dorm playing bid whist, and yeah, thank you, Pam. They definitely were. Yeah, saw some guys playing bid whist, in my dorm, and I watched how they played, and because I knew how to play bridge, I could pretty quickly pick up on the concept, on the differences. The fact that the cards can go uptown or downtown. For anyone listening who knows how to play the game, they know some of the differences there, and so I pretty soon, that gave me a chance to socialize with some of the guys in my dorm. I learned how to play bid whist, and we ran a Boston. That's where you make all the books. Then we would get up and jog around the room, and that's a game that Cindy and I still, when circumstances have permitted, we've enjoyed getting together with friends to play. The pandemic put a quietus on that for a while, but recently we had a couple of friends over that were vaccinated as we are, and with that, then we were able to play bid whist, and so it's something that to this day has been a group activity that's helped me. Another thing was professional counseling. Well, the early attempts my parents made to get me professional counseling had disappointing results. First time, by the time I was in first grade, Mom had seen a lot of things that were unusual about me. Of course, one of the things was I was way ahead of everybody in math, but the other thing is the extreme reaction I would have to negative situations. Like one time the bus on the way to kindergarten was in a fender bender an accident, and the accident itself didn't scare me, but then the bus driver shut us kids all up in the bus while he talked with the other driver and with the policeman, and that really scared me. I cried nonstop, and after that it was a number of months before I could be persuaded to board a school bus again. So as a result of that, I missed most of kindergarten, which back then they didn't do anything academic in kindergarten. Kindergarten was just playtime, basically. But it was that, and in first grade, there were other oddities. There was the fact, too, that at some point I stopped eating with a fork. I decided I didn't like the holes the forks made in food, so I insisted on eating everything with a spoon. And, there was that. And then there was the thing that drove the schools to tell my parents they had to get me to a child psychiatrist. And that was that I had the idea that the only time it was okay to use the school restrooms was during a class bathroom break. Well, my parents didn't understand that that was the problem, nor did anybody at the school understand that that was the problem. And so on several occasions, I wet or dirtied my pants in school. And so the school told my parents they had to take me to a child psychiatrist. So my mom, in preparation for going to the psychiatrist, she wrote him a long letter. And she told him about all the unusual things she'd observed about me. But she started out with the issue that drove the visit, the accidents in school. That shrink read just the first paragraph of the letter, and on that basis issued a dismissive diagnosis. He told my mom the problem was all her fault, that she was obsessed with toilet training. In subsequent years, Mom took me to a couple of other mental health professionals, a psychologist and another psychiatrist, and they both found other ways. Hey, Foxy Roxy. All right, but they found other ways to blame Mom for my social challenges. Now, by the way, the toilet accidents didn't continue after first grade. By the time I started second grade, I resolved that I would ask the teacher for permission when I needed to use the bathroom class, and so there are no more accidents. But there were other things that was clear. I just wasn't fitting in with other kids, and finally, when I was about 15, I think, Mom took me to a psychiatrist. That was a renowned psychiatrist, and in the Fairfield County area in Connecticut, and he told Mom that he could tell that this wasn't anything she had caused. He couldn't put a name to it, but he said that this was something bigger than anything she could have caused, and but they couldn't really afford his fees on an ongoing basis. Then, as I was getting ready to start my senior year in high school, Mom and Dad found a couple of psychologists in a neighboring town that they could afford. And so Mom and I went to those psychologists every Saturday morning, and Mom would talk with one of the doctors while I talked with the other one. And they too, they ran a battery of psychological tests on me, the ink blot tests and all that. And, they couldn't really put a name to anything, but they could they could at least deal with the symptoms, and among other things, they gave me a lot of advice that helped me both in getting along with my family then and in being prepared for college life. Hey Rachel, how are you doing? Good to see you here. Yeah, this is my wife Cindy. Probably
Hi,
recognize her. Yeah.
Somebody recognize me.
But now, learning social etiquette, I mean, part of it was parental training. Like my dad, teaching us basic manners, teaching us table manners, teaching us saying please and thank you, and my dad setting the example, and holding the door for my mom and holding the door for women, and so on. That set an example for me. And another thing that helped was I devoured advice columns, newspaper advice columns, magazine advice columns, magazine articles that had to do with social etiquette, and those helped. One point at the end of my freshman year of college, I was really frustrated with difficulty I was having fitting in and so on, and I was saying a barrage of cuss words, and another guy on my floor took me aside and asked me to come to his room, and he explained to me the things that that I needed to adjust, and what things I should not say, and the advice he gave me went quite a long way and helping me to get along better the next year. And so that was another thing that helped. How do you help a child with cognitive disabilities to become more independent? A large part of that, again, is your expectations. But of course, your expectations have to be realistic, because some kids are so impaired that they are not going to grow up to be independent. But a large part of it still is you try to give the child opportunities to do this and that and the other thing for himself, and if he's ready for it, he'll do it. If he's not ready, then he's not ready. And again, like I say, in this group, you've got some kids that are level 1, as I was, although I didn't have a label for it. Some that are level 2 that may be able to function independently, or may be able to function semi-independently with some services, but then some level 3 that are just not going to. And you can teach them whatever degree of independence is possible for the child. And sometimes too, it's a matter of not giving up. If a child is not ready to do something, a certain thing for himself now, maybe next year or a couple of years from now, he'll be ready. Um, I'll mention too, a subject that has come up in this group is the issue of age appropriateness. That's and age appropriateness when it comes to toys, games, and so on. That's something where you have to look at the individual child, uh, because when you have a child who's level one, who has a reasonable hope of being able to function independently as an adult, then it is important to encourage the child to do age appropriate things, because these not if at age 15 he's still playing with toys that most 5-year-olds play with, well, what are the prospects for his being able to function as an adult when he turns 18? You know, Again, though, you got to look at each child because children are different. Some Ralph does not like to cook, but I'm sorry, but I'm lucky. He eats great. That's good. Yeah, not all kids on the spectrum have food issues, but I'm reading some who have severe food issues, eating nothing but chicken McNuggets, and I feel for the parents that are dealing with that. I raised a neurotypical daughter, and even she could be fussy about food at times. I would tell her, "Well, eat this; it'll put hair on your chest," and she would tell me, "That's what I'm afraid of." It didn't work too well, but tried it. Um, Another thing was the religious conversion I underwent during my junior and senior years of college. I started studying the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses, and I was baptized as one of Jehovah's Witnesses during my senior year in college, and I've been one ever since. My parents initially, weren't too happy about it, but, they had determined to let me make my own decisions in life. And that's been their position toward my sister and my brother as well. And some of the ways in which this made a difference to me, one thing is, I could walk into the Kingdom Hall. Now I had brothers and sisters who viewed me as their brother. And I learned, advice that went way beyond even what that college friend had told me in my freshman year, which was helpful. But, put aside the foul language, the dirty jokes, learn to try to treat people the way I would want to be treated, applying the golden rule. It also gave me relief from anxiety over dating. I, I didn't date at all in high school. I dated one girl briefly in college, but that didn't last. Well, now, I viewed it, dating as a way you get ready to get married, and I wasn't ready to get married yet, and I was still in college. Well, now I'm going to go into my experience of transition, going back over my experience. First thing I would say, getting my driver's license. I was 16 going on 17. It was right around the beginning, or maybe just before the beginning of my senior year of high school, that I got my driver's license. And, that gave me, some independence, ability to move around independently. Then a year later, I began college. Oh boy, it's not getting my foot out from under my chair. Okay, a year later, began college, went to Michigan State. Now that was over 1,000 kilometers from my family's home in Connecticut. So that was quite a jump, being that far away from home. But, I have to give some credit to an RA, resident assistant in my first year of college, my freshman year, who
The hardest part of transitioning for you.
what was the hardest part of transitioning for me?
When you got
That's
when you were in high school.
that's not necessarily, maybe it was actually, maybe I would say the hardest part may have been landing my first job, which I'm going to get to, my first permanent full-time job. Okay, qualify that. Um, but I'm anyway. I got through my freshman year, and and then things got easier after that, and getting through college, and 1968, I graduated with honor from Michigan State, and the following year, and this is after months of job hunting, and the job hunting was perhaps a very challenging, probably a very challenging part of this because, um, I didn't have good interview skills, and finally, an employment agent at one of the employment agencies I went to sat me down and basically told me everything I'd been doing wrong, and helped me to know what I needed to do, and everything from the handshake to the look the interviewer in the face, and everything he went into the art of interviewing, and even though he wasn't the one through whom I ended up getting the job, um, his advice was really helpful. But I finally, in 1969, I began work as a computer programmer trainee at Combined Insurance Company in Chicago. And, now that I started working there, my family, at that point, my family had moved a year or a couple of years earlier. They'd moved to Illinois, to the Chicago suburbs. That's how I was in Chicago. And so I was living at home with my parents. Well, now I needed to live near my job because my job was on the north side of Chicago. So at first, what I would do is I would stay in a motel in Chicago uh, during the week, and I would spend the weekends at home. Then I got a furnished apartment. It was a really flea bag place, but at least it was a place I could stay with a week-to-week rental until then somebody with whom I worked told me about a new apartment building that just opened up on Sheridan Road, 4 blocks from where I worked. And I went there and applied and was accepted, got my first. It was a bedroomette apartment, which is a cut above a studio. It's a studio with a small partitioned off bedroom, but very basic. But with that, I was able to live on my own, and I lived there for the next year and a half and walked to work, which was nice, being able to walk. And then about a month after I got that apartment, after I moved into my apartment, I was at a 3-day assembly, 3-day religious assembly, and an older lady in a congregation that I had been associating with temporarily, introduced me to a young lady that that she had been helping, and anyway, we sat together for the last day's session, and I asked her out for a date the following week. Her name is Judy, and anyway, we dated for a year and a half, and we were married in August of 1971, and and then we moved out to an apartment in the suburbs that was a 1-bedroom, a little more suited to us, and then we ended up buying a house with the help of her relatives, down payment. a year and a day after Judy and I were married, our daughter Dorothy was born. She's my only child. You know, she's now she just turned 49 years old now, and so you know, there I knew, you know, this is a really awesome responsibility I have now in raising a child. But again, I go back to my parents' expectations. You know, they expected me to do that, and you know, that's what I did. And you know, Dorothy and I bonded quickly. Bonded when she was a little girl. You know, sometimes we drove her mother up a wall. I shared with this group one time when Dorothy was 2 going on 3. I decided to introduce her to knock knock jokes. Well, Dorothy wasn't quite ready, but the result was hilarious nevertheless. Dorothy right away wanted me to tell me one. So she goes, knock knock. So I'm like, all right, who's there? Knock knock. All right, knock knock who? She goes, knock knock. Oh, well, that became a routine we did over and over again in the car when we were on vacation. Knock knock, who's there? Knock knock. Knock knock who? Knock knock. Oh, uh, that was the kind of thing that we did, and Dorothy and I still remember those things, still reminisce. And anyway, you know, that's my experience with transition. I may have left a lot of blanks there, but this is why I'm ready to field questions. What about socially? Was I able to make and maintain friendships more easily as I transitioned? Yes, I was. And in college, yeah, as I mentioned, you know, learning how to play bid whist, and you know, you know, I made some friends with guys with whom I played cards. Then later, when I became one of Jehovah's Witnesses, that was a place where I made friends. And again, you know, the things I learned in terms of basic social skills, and that includes things that my parents had taught me in terms of manners, things that, you know, I'd learned from reading advice columns and articles on social etiquette. You know, that all those things helped.
Maintain friendships.
And they've helped, you know, ever since then. The hardest part when I finally started to work, you know, I found once I started to work, that wasn't the difficult part. Was the interviewing. You know, that's the point Temple Grandin made in her book Thinking in Pictures, is that can be the toughest part for somebody with autism. It's landing that job, because once you get the job, you can show them what you can do. Of course, there were situations on the job over the years where you know, there were misunderstandings about things, and you know, like one time when I stayed late to start work on this hot project that I was working on, but there was a production problem that somebody encountered, and this programmer came over to me with this problem he had with getting this program he had, you know, compiled. And I looked at it and I said, I think I see what I need to do, but he didn't tell me that that this was a production problem. The day was February 28th of 1980, and the next day it was February 29th, and this program had a problem handling February 29th, and they just discovered that, and that's what the problem was. But he didn't tell me that. So as far as I knew, this is a development problem, and it could wait till the next day. And so I said, okay, I'm going to wait till tomorrow and talk with my supervisor about what's the best way to proceed, and instead of jumping in and doing what looked like the thing to do. And so, I'm back to working on the project I was working on. And next day, and eventually my supervisor, who had gone home early because he had a cold, I was surprised to see him come back in. And I didn't know what that was about, but then he asked me about this, and I said, well, I think this is what needs to be done. And he said, well, then do it. So I did it and got the programmer past the problem he was having. The next day, he kind of called me on the carpet about the thing. Well, thing was, nobody had communicated to me that it was a production problem. I thought it was a problem with a program he was working on writing or changing. It wasn't an emergency. Nobody said this is an emergency. And so, no, I didn't notice. And he said, well, didn't you see people running around like chickens with their heads cut off? And that's the problem. No, I was focused on what I was doing, and I didn't see what was going on around me. So, there have been situations like that over the years. I won't say it was a scary time, but I would say it was. I would say there were frustrations more than being scared. It was a matter of being frustrated, and like that time at the end of my freshman year when I was, yelling a barrage of cuss words. I was frustrated with my inability to fit in with the other kids, and that was when the guy took me aside and explained to me, things that, the reasons for the difficulties I was having, and so I would say it's more a matter of frustration than a matter of scariness. Well, one thing I'll tell you what I did. I would say read a book on autism, watch TV show or a movie that has an autistic character. Those can help you in deciding to what extent do you identify with that character. You can read a book and see if you agree with it. Because I'll tell you how I got diagnosed. I'll tell you how that went. It was that my daughter by then was an adult. And anyway, I understand the movie Rain Man, I think, came out in the late 1980s, but my daughter watched it, several years after it came out. Either she rented the movie, probably, I think that's what she did, but she began urging me to watch the movie, and I didn't. But then, well, first, what happened in 1995, in February of that year, an issue of Awake magazine had an article about autism, and I read it through, and it was about mostly classic autism, what we now would call level 2 or level 3. But I could see, that some of those things sound like a more severe version of things that have been of traits I've exhibited. And what especially caught my eye was a box about special abilities, because I knew I had a special ability in math. And so I said, I wonder if there's a milder form of this. And then I kind of forgot about it. But then that December, at the end of that year, I turned on the TV, and it happened that the movie Rain Man was just beginning. And I said, all right, Dorothy's been telling me I need to watch this movie. I'm going to watch this movie. And, then I got into it. I could see why. I could see Raymond as a more severe version of myself. And see, first of all, his ability with numbers. Of course, I can't multiply numbers the way he could, but if you give me 2 3-digit numbers, I can multiply them in my head with no problem. And, it's just something, again, most people can't do. I can recite to you 76 to the 12th power. How many people can do that? So I could see that I had, an unusual ability with numbers. Also, other things about Raymond, like his his memory for exact numbers of people killed in plane crashes of various airlines. Um, that wasn't a statistic I specifically remembered. I could relate to it in terms of being able to remember details that were trivial to most people. Um, then, when he got stuck, he was crossing the street, and the sign said walk. He got halfway across, and the sign turned walk to don't walk, and he stopped. Didn't know how to proceed. Well, although I have always had enough sense that I would have known, keep going, finish crossing the street, or at least go back to where I started, but don't just stand there in the middle of the street. I would have understood that, but I still could relate to it in the sense of not understanding the difference between a general guideline and a hard and fast rule. Um, I could relate to that. I could relate my toilet accidents in first grade to that. My having the idea that you're only supposed to use the school bathrooms during a class bathroom break. I could relate that to Raymond stopping in the middle of the street when the sign changed to don't walk. I also could relate to the way he reacted to a catchy commercial jingle. And so I saw all these things, and I said, I wonder if there is a milder form of this. So I went and got out my copy of the Mayo Clinic Family Medical Guide and read the discussion of autism in it. And at the very end, it said there is also a milder form of autism whose main symptom is social awkwardness. Bingo. There it was. A few months later, I happened to be listening to NPR, National Public Radio, and they were interviewing Temple Grandin. And I had heard something about her, but here she was discussing her book, Thinking in Pictures. And, she was, a lot of things she said I could relate to. So now I knew what her book was. So I went out and got it and read it through, and I could relate to a lot of it. And I don't think in pictures, but that's something too that she covered in that book. She said that some with what are called higher functioning forms of autism, I'll call it level 1, um, think verbally. And so she said, not everybody with autism thinks in pictures, nor does everybody who thinks in pictures have autism, because Cindy is a pictorial thinker and she's not on the autism spectrum. But, anyway, I could see enough there, and I learned the terminology too in vogue at the time, which has changed since then, but at the time where they spoke of Asperger's syndrome and so on. And that, I'll get to that question in a minute. That anyway, then led me to call the president of the local chapter of Autism Society of America, and she put me on to a neurologist, who was good at diagnosing autism, and he made the formal diagnosis. So that's how I got it. Now, bullying, I experienced bullying, particularly in childhood. I've seen some workplace bullies, and but more so, less so at work than in childhood. Growing up, schoolyard bullies, and of course back then, schoolyard bullies were a lot easier to endure because when you got home, you were away from it. Now it's around the clock because they use social media, and it's it's really bad now, and but advice that one, I forget whether he was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but he told me, to try to ignore bullies, which sometimes worked. Uh, give him credit for that. So, uh, but yeah, I experienced it. Um, I've
I want to hear
yeah.
her
Let's
speak,
speak.
learn so much. I want to hear her speak, learn so much from
I went to hear her speak once too. Went with my daughter and well now ex son-in-law, but anyway, I went with them and we heard her speak once, and it was interesting. We got an autographed copy of the book afterward. So yeah, yeah, I really admire her, and she's done a lot too to encourage parents, and she too is big on the idea of having high expectations because that's what helped her. That's what made a difference for her. Her mother didn't accept that doctor's pessimistic view, while she just hopelessly brain damaged. So yeah, uh, I there was a group that I quit recently, quit several months ago, but I was participating and I could see it just I wasn't contributing anything useful to the group, and it just wasn't a good group. It was one that had the ambitious goal of being for both parents and adults with autism, but the problem was the young adults with autism in that group caused a lot of drama. And for one thing, I noticed in the parent support group the puzzle piece. You see that all the time. Don't show a puzzle piece in that group. Those young adults with autism would get offended at that. And you know, one young woman made the statement that the puzzle piece had hurt her. I resisted the temptation to ask her what happened. Did a gigantic brick in the shape of a puzzle piece fall on your head? I resisted the temptation to say that, but you know, in any case, that's the thing. I think some of these this autism identity movement that you hear about today, there are a lot of questionable identity movements, and I think it does a disservice to people on the spectrum because there's a need to adapt. Some call it masking. I don't call it masking. I don't make any effort to conceal the fact that I'm on the autism spectrum. I share that with people freely. People who know me know that about me. But it's a matter of adapting. It's adapting. Your behavior, your interactions with other people to fit in with them to the best of our ability. And
what
that's
say you struggle with the most
what do I struggle with the most now? Um, Again, sometimes seeing beneath the surface of a situation when I'm working with somebody, particularly trying to help somebody with a situation, seeing beneath the surface of the situation, seeing okay what's the real issue here. Sometimes that can be difficult. On the other hand, sometimes that's I actually in some situations find that easier to do than others do. I'm see an issue right away. It's just plain as day, whereas some others might struggle to see the issue. So I don't know. Sometimes it's 50-50. It's sometimes it's a handicap. Sometimes it's an advantage.
sounds good. What other advice do you have for us parents and helping our loved ones to adulthood?
The biggest thing, again, I go back to the expectations. And if you have high expectations, that will affect the way you talk with your child. You'll tell your child about experiences. If you want your child to go to college, you'll explain things about college life. Tell about your college life. You tell about your experiences in dating. You tell about things like this. You'll share things that you would with the child if the child were neurotypical. Um, Again, though, keeping in mind, the child's ability to understand. Um, you know, and sometimes too, um, it's a matter. Some concepts you may have to go out of your way to explain. I'll give an example. My dad had to go out of his way to explain the idea of metaphors and figures of speech. Because my tendency to just take things literally, and sometimes it's just a matter of explaining what he meant by something he said. Sometimes otherwise it was other things, like a sequence of signs along the road that we saw that said, "Drunken drivers, nothing worse. They put the quart before the hearse. Burma shave." Now, first of all, that dates me. It tells my age, because if you're probably nobody else here has ever seen Burma shave signs. I don't know if you even remember seeing
I
them.
remember hearing about
Yeah,
them.
yeah. You know, I think I must have been about 10 or 11 when they disappeared off the roads, which means Cindy would have been 6 or 7 when they disappeared. But anyway, that was my dad explained to me. And of course, I got the fact that it was a safety message warning against drunken driving. But my dad explained to me there was a play on words there too. They put the quart before the hearse. He explained to me about the expression "putting the cart before the horse," and when he explained it, because I got what that meant right away, because you put a cart behind a horse so the horse can pull the cart, and you're putting things in the wrong order before when you put the cart in front of the horse. But explaining that sort of thing to me, that helped me. And let's see, have I been able to answer questions adequately? Is there anything more anybody would like to ask? But it's anyway. I hope that I've been of help to the parents that were on here. I unfortunately can't see who all is on. I just see the questions as they come up.
Do you have a gallery in there?
Let's see, is there a gallery here? I don't see a gallery view of this. No.
Always good information, Mr. Charles.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Anita. And I'm glad to do this. Again, I hope, I've been of some help. I've now just telling everybody a little bit more.
So much.
Oh, she is.
Oh.
She is, yeah.
Thank you.
And, I'll show you my daughter now. This is my daughter. Yeah, you can see her. That's Dorothy. I have 2 grandchildren now too. I don't have a picture handy that shows my grandchildren. I've shared some pictures of my grandchildren in the group too. So the group has seen them. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Pam. I'm glad to share things with people. Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, I have my daughter, and I have 2 grown grandchildren. My granddaughter McKenna is 22, and my grandson Ronan just turned 20. Well, if there are no other questions, again, it's been my pleasure. I'll wish everybody a good night.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Okay, I'll go ahead
Good night.
and night.